So you'll notice there, you probably would have seen Cayla and Shawn in shot. You wouldn't have seen me because I was behind the camera, which is where I normally like to be, not in front of it.
Capturing the crucial moments,
yeah,
obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was actually in Kenya at the old Jeddah Nature Conservancy, where we were working with rhinos and the World Wildlife Fund. So let me just advance the slide so I can do a formal introduction. Cayla Yang is a program manager with Cisco, and her focus is wildlife and sustainment. And then further along the line over there, we have a FLIR guy, Shawn Jepson, who I've known a long time. He's a solutions architect and has been working on designing solutions for protecting wildlife from poachers in Kenya and other places, and we're going to be talking about Zambia. So I'm going to just let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do and what their companies are both doing in this area.
Yeah. Thank you, Bruce. So as Bruce said, I work for Cisco, which many of you may know is the networking company. We have evolved to beyond that. We connect billions of people, and now we're using our networking technology to really try and make a difference in the world and bringing it to reserves such as those in Africa to sort of look at a tech for good angle using cloud computing, using artificial intelligence, and a lot of my programs work around that in partnerships such as that with FLIR.
Great. Thanks, Cayla. Shawn?
Thanks, Cayla. So I've worked for FLIR for a while now, and FLIR, a long time ago, FLIR was mainly focused on big government and academic type projects. Over the years, that's become more attainable by commercial entities. So initially we were protecting borders of countries, and then it became borders of airports, and now people can buy FLIR to protect their home. And with the wildlife problem, we found that a lot of the experience that we've gained protecting countries' borders and airport borders also works to protect the borders of parks where these wildlife are. And so over the last couple of years, we've spent a lot of time looking at parks and ways that we can protect some of these endangered species.
Right. I had to make sure I didn't click twice. Thank you very much, Shawn. Yes, I mean, I think the reality here, and this is really what we're going to be talking about today, is this sort of what can we learn from the work we do, both Cisco in networking on a major scale and FLIR in terms of protecting borders and perimeters. How can we take those lessons and bring them to the bush where we can protect animals from poachers? And then also, what lessons can we learn in those environments that are much harsher, much more difficult, that we can bring back into urban environments and so on. So I guess this issue of wildlife crime is massive. It's a $10 billion industry. It's the fifth largest crime, organized crime industry in the world. It destabilizes governments, it funds terrorism, it's a real problem. And so the work that Cisco and FLIR are doing in this area, along with the World Wildlife Fund as well, is incredibly important. The park that we're going to talk about specifically here is Kafue National Park in Zambia, and you may hear from my very strange accent that I'm not from around these parts. I'm actually South African, so this is really near and dear to my heart. Zambia, which is is only a country away from us in South Africa, is home to the second largest national park in all of Africa, the Kafue National Park. It is the size of Massachusetts, just to give you some sort of scale. And you can just imagine that the poaching that goes on there is very, very hard to maintain, just because of its sheer scale. And one of the issues we've had to overcome in that area is also a massive lake, which means poachers can use the lake as cover, under the cover of darkness, to actually gain access into the park, and it becomes a very, very big problem to solve. And so, I think if I just click forward, we'll show you a little video that give you a little bit of background on Kafue, and then we'll get started on this talk. Thank you. Can you recue the presentation, please? Thank you. So we formalized a working collaboration in 2019 between FLIR and Cisco, but and that's when I met Shawn, met Cayla at least. But you guys had actually been working in Kafui much earlier than that, right? Or at least the World Wildlife was with our products. Can you provide a little bit of background on how we actually got together and how we started working together?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kafui National Park, as Bruce said, is one of the largest reserves in Africa. And so obviously the problems there are much more profound. World Wildlife Fund had been working with both FLIR and Cisco, and that was one of the reserves that sort of brought us all together. And World Wildlife Fund realized that they really needed the subject matter experts along with their technology to make the most impact in that area. And fortunately, once we were all able to sort of come together, as with most things, everything takes a little bit of cooperation and collaboration, we were really able to see significant successes, not just with the rangers and their training, but also in the poachers that we were able to apprehend and all of the animals that we were able to save. So it was just an amazing coming together of subject matter experts, just between Shawn and the work at the networking equipment that Cisco has and the rangers. So,
yeah, I would just add, the rangers there are some of the most dedicated people that I've ever met. The desire is there. The capabilities just weren't there. The resources weren't there. They were backpacking in to these really remote areas. I mean, imagine a national park the size of Kafui, or Massachusetts, and these rangers on foot and without any phones, without any infrastructure to support that, and having the Cisco networking gear come together and the FLIR thermal cameras and the other devices that we supplied. It really was a game changer there. It made a huge difference in the way they can not only find but apprehend the poachers.
So I guess World Wildlife Fund had done some work with FLIR cameras in the Masai Mara, and I guess that was really the catalyst for doing the Kafui project, wasn't it?
That's right. The World Wildlife Fund went off on this on their own. Without FLIR had no knowledge of it, and they just thought, what can we do with thermal? And they went to the Masai Mara in Kenya, which borders the Serengeti in Tanzania. It's a very popular place, and were blown away by the successes they had giving the rangers thermal cameras. Because most of the poaching happened at night when the poachers could use the cover of night to get in and get the animals and get out. It was a real game changer, and Kafui National Park was a logical next step, a place to...
And I want to say, like, the fact that, FLIR had no knowledge of it, but then took it upon yourselves to actually make it part of their company mission and bring in conservation as an effort that you're now taking on full time.
Absolutely. FLIR has a pretty established corporate social responsibility program, and when we saw what the World Wildlife Fund was doing, it just fit right in, and we knew we had to help.
Yep, absolutely.
One of the issues we've got in Kafui is this large body of water, as I mentioned, Lake Etsitesi, correct? I think I said that right.
Itezi.
Yeah. I thought I would get that wrong. It's a massive body of water, which means we sort of had to use marine cameras on there as well. And then I believe there are 4 masts, which have to be connected with Cisco equipment. What sort of challenges does that bring when you're out in the bush and you have to create a system like that? Basically a digital trip line.
Right. Well, I can say from a Cisco point of view, when you're looking at a large marine body and you have to build a mast on these small almost islands in the middle of the water. That's not easy. A lot of our customers sometimes struggle to build a network in a nice Silicon Valley, data center, let alone you're in the middle of Zambia where you actually have to hike in the gear, deal with the rainy season. You've got almost everything working against you between weather, animals, a lack of skill set, and it's dark. You're in a new environment. So building these masts and then connecting it and then getting the cameras, it's one of those scenarios where you don't really realize how difficult it is until your boots on the ground. And it's a very surreal experience when you're thousands and thousands of miles away in a Silicon Valley data center.
It's true. And I'll go back to the dedication of the Rangers. I mean, you talk about building a mast on an island somewhere in the U.S. would be difficult enough, but you do it in the middle of Africa when you have no infrastructure and no resources to do it. The dedication of the Rangers who were putting mast sections on their back and hiking in.
And climbing up these masts that are probably hundreds of feet. And, even your most, brave engineers, you wouldn't want to do that when you're falling to waters with hippos and black mambas. And it's sometimes kind of funny when you have these engineers who've seen almost everything and then you can't get them to go into these countries to go and install these. It's kind of amusing when you see what people's lines are.
But the payoff is there. After the work is done and it started working, the results were...
Yeah, it was very impressive. And the Rangers are so dedicated. They want to learn about how the technology works because, and I'm sure you can attest this, the technology is really only as good as the people that use it. So if you dedicate, all this time and energy to set up a network and you don't actually take the time to train everyone that's there, you leave and it sits gathering dust. So the people that you're working with are so crucial, as it would be for any standard client engagement, as many of you may know.
So it brings a term to mind, connected conservation. Just given the lessons we learn in those really harsh environments with all of the challenges that you faced, what are the parallels with smart cities and connected urban environments? Are there any? What are they?
I would say absolutely. So with Cisco, we look at sustainability and we look at tech for good in a way that we can then transfer those use cases to a commercial vertical, right? So if you're looking at being able to deploy our routers and our gateways and all of the standard technology in the middle of Zambia, in the middle of the bush where you've got dust and bugs and everything fighting against your very clean sealed kits, if it can survive out there for months and months, it can survive almost anywhere. So being able to go to a client and saying, look, you're going to have this piece of technology for years and years and your maintenance, look at what it can survive. So it's almost a very, it's a confidence boost for our clients, for our sales teams, for everyone. And then going back, when you're deploying in a smart city environment, you can say, okay, these are the best cases for, say Boston, if we're looking at Kafui being the size of Massachusetts, and you bring it back to the bush and you say, okay, this is what worked here, but how do we tweak it a little bit to make it different here?
The benefits definitely go both ways. So, in smart cities, you're looking at data is really the lifeblood of a smart city. And FLIR makes a lot of sensors, produces a lot of data, but if you can't share that, if people don't have access to the data, then it's useless. And so all of the lessons we learned in a smart city, we were seeing in the parks, because you would have groups of rangers walking around. There's no cell service, there's no radio towers, they can't communicate. They all have little bits and pieces of data, but they can't share it with each other and they can't coordinate. So the lessons from the smart cities really came into play as we're setting up these parks, but all the challenges that come from the parks just made us have to make it that much better, which then we can turn back around into the smart city offerings.
Exactly. What about the communities in these, around Kafui and I remember when we were in Old Pedge, the conservancy itself is literally surrounded by small communities and small settlements where, there's you mentioned data being the lifeblood. For them, the park itself was a lifeblood. How do we approach the communities in those situations, and how did we do it in Kafui in particular?
So it's interesting. So you brought up Old Pedge. People here, you probably have seen pictures from Old Pedgeta. National Geographic recently ran a cover photo of a ranger standing or kneeling next to Sudan, who was the last male northern white rhino who had died, and there's only 2 females. That's Olpegida. That's where we were. And that has an impact. And the communities around there, like you said, the park, those animals are the lifeblood. And it's really interesting to see the relationship between the two. So Olpegida is working a lot in conservation, conserving the animals. And they're making some money off of tourism, but they're putting that right back into the communities and educating the communities. They're helping them with water. They're helping them with crops. They're helping them with all that kind of thing. And it creates this interesting relationship where everyone is invested in the success of these animals and preventing the poaching from happening.
Absolutely. And I think to add on to that, with the community, you're really making it a joint effort. And one of the things that drives a lot of our initiatives, or at least in Tech for Good, are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And if you haven't heard of them, I highly encourage you to look them up. It's essentially 17 goals that the UN has proposed, things that we have to reach in order to have a sustainable planet by 2030. And having smart and sustainable cities is one of them. And also looking at communities, education, health, well-being, and that is what we try and do with every single one of our deployments, is how do we enable the community to not only protect the animals, which are essentially, if you look at it in a commercial standpoint, a high value asset. So any of your industries, anything, you have a high value asset, something that you want to protect. So do these people and so do these communities. It's things that they're able to leverage in order to support their livelihoods. So we really want to make sure that we don't seagull, which is a term that we use sometimes, is you flutter in, you drop some tech, and then you fly away. We want to make sure that we're really enabling them to make the difference and have a strong impact so that that whole community rises together, and therefore they don't need to make money from poaching. A lot of these individuals who are forced into killing an animal just for its horns, just for that small amount of money, they really don't actually see the true cycle of how that money is used and what can actually be leveraged as the lifespan of that animal for them instead.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Just to turn back really quickly to Kafui, you mentioned earlier on, Shawn, that the data and connectivity is obviously the lifeblood. What happens when the data comes back? What are we doing with it? How do the poachers? How do the rangers make sense of that information? What do they do with it when they've got it?
It's a great question. And it's a changing answer, right? Because when you've never had the data, you become, when you start receiving it, you're not sure what to do with it right away, right? But as you have it, you find more and more things that you can do with it. So not only are they finding and catching poachers, but they're predicting where poachers may be. They're becoming much more efficient in their patrols. I was at a park a few months ago where the head ranger said that his rangers didn't even want to go out on patrol unless they had a thermal handheld camera with them because they didn't see the point. Whereas for years they had been going out on patrol without a thermal handheld camera. So as they're getting the data, I mean, they're showing us what they're doing with it, and it's becoming fascinating to watch as they get these capabilities, the way they're able to utilize them and the things they're able to do to protect the animals. Right.
Cayla, I know that we've had, since we were doing this work at Kafui, we've had quite a lot of successes. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so success metrics look different at almost every reserve, but at Kafui specifically, we've had a huge amount of successes. We've had, in the past 5 months, they've had 30 apprehensions, and that's 5 months. Now, that is in comparison to their 27 in the last year before the technology was installed. Already, these rangers are being able to use the technology and use the data to be much more effective in how they apprehend and confiscate boats, illegal bushmeat, illegal fish, and the poachers themselves. You saw there are some photos of the confiscated ivory. And that was actually just in the past year, I believe. And I think one of the other metrics that we don't really talk about enough is the fact that we've trained actually 30 new rangers on the technology. And we've given 30 new rangers a job. That is 30 new individuals that are able to bring home an income to their families, that are able to say no if they're ever approached to poach an animal because they have a steady income and a steady job. And I think that's one of the most important metrics, is that we're giving people a livelihood. And I know that that's something that's very close to FLIR's heart, being part of your mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is. Shawn mentioned earlier on that our corporate social responsibility program is a very big focus for us, a big mission for us. And one of those three pillars of the three pillars that we have is planet, where we're really focused on making sure that our technology is used for good in these environments. I think with that, it's probably a good idea for us to maybe take an opportunity to open up for questions. So I'll hand the microphone to you if you just put your hand up, and I'll hand the microphone to you. Thank you.
Hello, sir.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
If my livelihood had been based on poaching and I see these cameras taking pictures, I would hire a sniper to shoot them out. Have you had problems with sabotage?
Not as much as you would expect, not as much as we expected. I think for the most part, people appreciate what the cameras are there to do. And the communities are all very tight-knit, and not a lot happens without people knowing. And people see the benefit and they appreciate it. So we haven't had as much sabotage as you would expect.
Except from the baboons. The baboons can be
that's
problematic.
Sabotage from the people. The animals, they can be curious, and that's another lesson we've learned, is how to protect the technology from the animals.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things, just adding on, is these individuals that are living in these communities don't have the same knowledge of technology that we all take for granted. You know, we're all very fortunate to be here at CES, and we all understand the modern day technologies, but when the masts were first installed, the technology hadn't been installed, mind you. There was just these new masts. There was an absolute stop in illegal fishing because no one had any idea what was happening. So it's almost as if, you know, there's a little bit of apprehension at first, and they don't want to they want to test it out. People are very intuitive, and so the technology is there, as Shawn said, to help, and these communities want that as much as they can. And they might not have the access to the snipers that I don't know if you have. So I'm gonna stay on your good side.
Thank you. That was a good question. Any other questions? There've got to be some more questions.
Did you find any resistance from the governments toward importing equipment without having to pay taxes or expediting fees?
You have tricky questions.
I'm not quite sure how to respond to that. Working in every country has different obstacles. Everyone is very, very excited that we want to work with them, but every government is also very wary, especially in Africa when you're working in different countries. There is a layer of doubt, and there's a layer of suspicion, and also in these countries they really do want to capitalize on companies coming in and bringing in new technologies. So there have been, you know, import taxes and custom fees, and we work with them, and we're not trying to get around anything. We're very fortunate to be in the positions that we are, and we do just want to help. So there have been a couple of holdups in customs, as you would expect, but that's almost everywhere that you would find, especially when you're shipping technology that, you know, I obviously couldn't tell you what's in a box if you've got 19 different letters and numbers and a serial number, and so they're equally as concerned about that. So
I will say that obviously working closely with the World Wildlife Fund has been a big
Hugely
advantage
helpful.
for us, because
Hugely
they
helpful.
have people on the ground there that understand the processes and understand the regulations, and they've been incredibly advantageous for us
Yes,
in that
that's
respect.
Yeah.
There's
Do you have
got
a
to be
third
more
question?
questions.
Third question?
Come on. Yeah, go for 3. You can do it. Nobody else? I don't believe it. You all are just waiting for the prize giveaway?
How many of you have been to Africa? 1? The guy is 2?
Why were you in Africa, if I may ask?
A water project in Congo.
Ah,
So we had all those problems that I just...
I can imagine. The Congo is a particularly difficult area to work in.
Yeah, so you're speaking from experience, I can tell.
I would
Right.
highly recommend that if you ever get the opportunity to go, it's one of the most life-changing trips that you can take. It is a little bit far, but it's completely worth it. And you really get to see just how important it is. And these lands that are completely untouched, I mean, we're in Vegas right now, and that can be its own kind of jungle. But if
It's
you
a different
go,
kind of wildlife
it's a different
here.
kind of wildlife here. But I mean, I would take the African bush over this any day of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shawn, you live up in Montana, so
I do.
I guess it's a little more of an analogy for you, right?
Yeah, it's more my speed. Yep. Yeah, and I would second that. And no matter how many documentaries you've seen or Nat Geo articles you've read, nothing is like being there.
Yeah. And there's no time like the present. Unfortunately, we are losing 3 rhino every single day, over 100 elephant almost every day. So while you've been sitting here at CES for the past week, we're probably about 500 elephant down already, and that's across Africa. And that's just Africa. I can't even go into the statistics about Southeast Asia and all of those other areas, but if you get the opportunity, go, and it's just truly magical.
Okay, no more questions? Well, I want to take the opportunity to thank Cayla
Thank
and
you.
Shawn, Cayla from Cisco and Shawn from FLIR for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been illuminating.
It's our pleasure. My
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.